कीर्ति पांडे आपके साथ स्टडी विद एडीपी क्लास तेलंगाना एनसीईआरटी बेस पे फिर तैयारी करने आते हैं। ठीक है, देखिए जो हमने फर्स्ट चैप्टर कंप्लीट कर लिया। लेसन सेकंड, अर्ली इंडिया, द कैलकोलिथिक, मेगालिथिक, आयरन एज एंड वैदिक कल्चर्स। व्हाट इज़ द वैदिक कल्चर? वैदिक काल के बारे में इसमें बात होगी। ठीक है, देखो जो वैदिक काल है, वैदिक कल्चर है, उसका अर्थ होता है हमारा ज्ञान। ठीक है, इसमें हम आर्य के बारे में पढ़ेंगे। आर्य कहाँ से आए थे, आर्यों का मूल निवास स्थान क्या था, उनके बारे में हमें जानना है। ठीक है, इसमें वेद भी आते हैं, वेद के बारे में डिस्क्रिप्शन होगा। आर्यों का मूल निवास स्थान जैसे विद्वानों के अकॉर्डिंग सब कुछ था यहाँ पे। ठीक है, फर्स्ट चैप्टर में जैसे हमने सब समझ लिया था कि भाई कहाँ क्या था, हड़प्पा सिविलाइजेशन था हमारा। ठीक है, आइए नेक्स्ट चैप्टर की ओर पढ़ते हैं। फर्स्ट चैप्टर की एक्सरसाइजेस हम लोग देख ही लिए थी, मैंने उस दिन दिखाई थी। आइए द नेक्स्ट चैप्टर इज सेकंड, इज़ वेरी मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट चैप्टर। इसमें हमें क्या पढ़ना है? लर्निंग ऑब्जेक्टिव्स टू अंडरस्टैंड द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ द Chalcolithic period in India, to know the megalithic Iron Age cultures of India, to get acquainted with Aryans, non-Aryans and Vedic cultures, to learn the distinctions between the early Vedic and later Vedic socialist societies. Introduction. A conventional view of the timeline of Indian history would simply shift its themes from the Indus civilization to the Vedic cultures to the age of the Mahajanpadas. But if we consider the time after the decline of the Hindu civilization covering from c. 2000 BCE to 600 BCE, and the space stretching from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Arunachal Pradesh or to Gujarat, it is clear that diverse cultures and people who spoke different languages lived in ancient India. The chapter focuses on the late Harappa, Chalcolithic, Iron Age, Vedic cultures and the Aryans, except for the Indus civilization which was covered in the previous lesson. Essentially, it deals with the history of India from about 3000 BCE up to the emergence of the Mahajanpadas with a focus on social and economical changes. What are the sources of India's culture? The history of India after the decline of the Indus civilization around 1900 BCE is characterized by the presence of nomadic Microlithic using hunter-gatherers and pastoral semi-sedentary and sedentary agro-pastoral communities of the Neolithic. Chalcolithic, Iron Ages and Vedic cultures, we have two main types of sources for this long span of time. See 3000 to 600 BC in Indian history. One source is the archaeological sites and material culture, including pottery, plant remains, and metal objects. The other in Vedic literature, there are no written documents for this period, since the Vedic texts were transmitted orally. वैदिक ट्रांसमिटेड को हम ओरली पढ़ते थे, इसमें कोई भी रिटर्न साक्ष्य हमारे पास नहीं है. एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पीपल हैड नॉट डेवलप्ड अ स्क्रिप्ट इन इंडिया except the symbols of the Indus script, which are yet to be deciphered, correlating the archaeological cultures and the information related to various groups of the people from the Vedic text is not an easy task. There are various theories on the identity of the organization of the Indus civilization and various other archaeological cultures. We are dealing with diverse culture and communities with different modes of living in the space-time unit. The early Vedic culture is correlated with some of the Chalcolithic culture of India, while the later Vedic culture is correlated with the painted graveware culture of the Iron Age in North India. Unlike the age of Indus civilization, when the urban sites and farming cultures were in a limited area, we notice culture, agriculture, and technological expansion and developments in many parts of India in this period, accompanied by the growth of craft production and populating. A strong culture foundation was laid across India during this period, which finally culminated in the early historical period. The extensive foundations for the village settlements of India were laid during this period. Literature of Vedic culture. द वेदास, वेद तो न्यो विद्या. अभी मैंने बताया भी था कि वेदों का अर्थ होता है ज्ञान. हर शब्द एक भाषा सूचक शब्द होता है जिसका अर्थ होता है श्रेष्ठ या कुलीन, लेकिन क्लासिकी संस्कृत में एक उत्तम व्यक्ति माना जाता है. वैदिक साहित्य की जो रचना का श्रेय है ना, वो आर्य को ही जाता है. वैदिक के जो है वो हमारे आर्य को जाता है. ठीक है, are one of the earliest known texts to have been composed in the language of the Vedas is described as Vedic Sanskrit. The Vedas are four. Rig is the oldest, जो ऋग्वेद है वो सबसे प्राचीन, and the other being Yajur, Sam and Athar. The Vedic texts were memorized and orally transmitted Brahmins from generation to generation. They were written down in the later period after the introduction of writing the earliest known written manuscripts of the Vedas date to the 10th to 11th century CE. They contain information about the polity, society, religion, and philosophy, and hence they are a source for writing history. The main collection of Vedic hymns are called Samhitas. ठीक है? The Rigvedic Samhita is the earliest text. The Rig Veda is dated to between 1500 and 1000 BC. The Rig Veda contains 10 books. Books 2 to 10 are the earliest, and the books 1, 8, 9, and 10 are assigned to a later period. Samhitas are ritualistic texts and they explain the social and religious importance of rituals. Each Samhita has added text called Brahmans, which have commentaries of the hymns and rituals. Each Brahman has an Aryanka forest text and an Upanishad. The Aryankas contain mystical ritual instruction to be undertaken in secret by the Sikhs who live in the forest. Upanishads deal with philosophical inquiries. The Yajur, Sam, and Athar Vedas are dated to a slightly later period. The Samhitas of the Sam, Yajur, and Athar Vedas and the Brahmans, Aryans, and Upanishads attached to the Vedas are the late Vedic texts. The Sam Ved was composed in musical notes which are considered to continue the basis of Indian music. The Yajur Ved has rituals and hymns. The Athar Ved contains charms and magical spells. Zend अवस्था क्या है? The Zen Avesta is a Persian and Iranian text of journalism. This book speaks about the lands and gods of the people speaking the Indo-Iranian languages. It has reference to the region of northern and northwestern parts of India. It has terms which show linguistic similarity with the Vedas. This text is an intricate evidence that the early home of the Aryans was outside the Indian subcontinent. The pre-Aryan, late Harappa, and Chalcolithic cultures of India. The pre-Harappa cultures are the earliest Chalcolithic cultures of India, and they are found in the time before the beginning of the mature phase of the Harappa culture and continued to exist in the later period. The other Chalcolithic culture of India are more or less contemporary to the phase of Harappa culture, and they continued even after its decline. And like the mature urban phase of the Harappa civilization, Chalcolithic culture was pastoral and based on farming, generally rural in nature. They used copper and stone blades and pottery and also low grade iron in the later period. Their settlement was sedentary or semi-sedentary in the northwestern and western regions of India. The early farming cultures are associated with the Chalcolithic culture rather than the Neolithic cultures. The Chalcolithic people also began to domesticate animals in addition to agriculture. They had cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats and buffaloes. Evidence has been found of turtles and fowls in their settlements. The houses were made of stone, mud, bricks, mud, and perishable wooden materials and built on a stone foundation. Silos, well prepared pits, meant for storage and grains have been also found. The walls were made with bamboo frames. People used black and red ware and black on red ware pottery. These sites have produced a large quantity of copper objects. They used copper objects such as flax axes, bangles, rings, antimony rods, knives, blades, sockets, lace axes, barbed and tanked arrowheads, copper and scissors. Ochre colored pottery ware culture. Ochre-colored pottery ware culture is found in northern India dating to the Chalcolithic period. The OCP pottery has red slip and appears ochre in color. The ochre color comes off when the pottery is touched and hence it is called ochre-colored pottery. It has black painted. Black painted designs. The OCP comes in the form of jars, storage jars, bowls, and basins. The OCP culture dates to 2600 1200 BC and is found in the Indo-Gangetic plain and may have had some association with early Vedic culture. The OCP culture is seen as an impoverished Harappan culture, and some scholars see it as unrelated to the Harappa culture. The OCP sites produce copper figures and objects, and therefore it is also known as copper hoard culture. It is a rural culture and has evidence of the cultivation of rice, barley, and legumes. They also had Pastoralism, with evidence of cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, and dogs. The villages had wattle and daub houses. They used copper and terracotta ornaments. Animal figurines have also been found. Chalcolithic cultures of South India. The southern part of India has not produced cultural evidence of a full-fledged Chalcolithic culture. Perforated and spouted vessels have been found in some sites. Copper bronze tools like chisels and flag axes occur at this site. Stone tools continue to be used in this area. Black on red where pottery is found. These people survived through animals rearing and agriculture. Military pulses and horse gram were cultivated and fruits, leaves and tubers were collected. Iron Age in North India. The Iron Age in North India coincides with the painted grave work culture. The painted grave work is dated to from 1100 to 800 BC. More than 1000 sites have been identified with painted grave work pottery in northern India, with a major concentration in the Ganga Jamuna Valley. These ceramics succeeded the black and red in the eastern Ganga Valley and central India. This is the chart of Catholic sites. The pottery was fine grey in color with painted geometrical design. The painted grey were laid the foundation of the early political formation. It correlates with the Kuru Panchal kingdom known from the Vedic text. The painted grey work culture phase is followed by northern black polished work culture NBPW. Northern black polished work culture का full form है, which is associated with the Mahajanpadas and modern periods. The painted grey work sites reveal the development of agriculture and pastoralism, and the settlement of this period grew in dimension. They show a large-scale population increase in the northern part of India. The Iron Age in North India was coeval with painted grey ware culture, and in South India it was associated with megalithic burial mounds. Megalithic Iron Age in Tamil Nadu. The burial system followed by the people of Neolithic period continued into the Megalithic period. A circular tomb using big stone slabs built upon the place of burial is known as a megalith. Such megaliths have been found in many parts of Tamil Nadu. The own burial system was another type of practice and is evidence in Adikallur, present Thoothukudi district. Blackware is particular to burial system in Tamil Nadu. Interestingly, blackware is found mostly in burial mounds and not in the human habitation. In a majority of Unbunias, the use of stone is almost non-existent. However, Unbunias are grouped under megalithic because the materials of pottery, iron objects, beads of semi-precious stones kept in them are identical to those found in the stone burials. The end of megalithic burial practice is assigned to 3rd-2nd century CE. During this period, Brahmi writing akin to Ashokan Brahmi has been discovered in Kodumanal, Erode district. There is also evidence of the megalithic tradition continuing into later centuries. During the Sangam period, people still remember on Vanya the four primitive stones with stones Tamil Brahmi inscriptions datable to 3rd to 2nd century BCE found in upper part of the Valley support the authority of the hero stone tradition described in the Sangam Tamil literature in the context of cattle race. Scholars infer based on such evidence that the sum of Sangam poems could be assigned to the early 1st century BCE or a little earlier. The tradition of erecting hero stones in memory of dead warriors heroes is considered to be an extension of the menhir types of megalithic tradition. Menhirs upright monumental stones and dolmens made of big slabs or boulders are megalithic tombs found in Tamil Nadu. Black and rare ware along with particle human remains and iron objects were unearthed recently at Veda Malkunda in Krishnagiri, Tamil Nadu. A few stone slabs were also found at this site. A centuries old menhir in Singarpalayam, excavated near Kundadam in Tirupur district, points to the existence of an ancient settlement along the banks of river Uppar. Adikallur, megalithic sites in Tamil Nadu. Adikallur. Adikallur, 22 km from Tirunelveli, is located in Toothkundi district. In 1876, a German ethnologist and naturalist Andrew Jagor conducted an excavation at Adikannur. He carried with him samples of bagged earthenware, utensils of all sizes and shapes, a considerable number of iron weapons and implements, and great quantities of bones and skulls. These are now housed in a Berlin museum. The then district collector of Trivandrum, A.J. Stewart, and the famous linguist Bishop Robert Caldwell visited Adikannu subsequently found it was a quartz site. Quarrying was immediately banned, and archaeological excavation commenced under the supervisor of Alexander Rea. Rea prepared a comprehensive account of his findings illustrated by photographs and was published in the annual report of the Archaeological Survey of India 1900 1902 to 1903. Nearly 100 years later, the ESI carried out another excavation and brought out more information. The report is awaited. The Vernal Mound and Adi Kannul yield the following: first, wounds and pottery of various kinds in large numbers; second, iron implements including spears and weapons, daggers, swords, spears, and arrows like this; some stones, beads, and a few gold ornaments; bronze objects representing the domestic animals such as buffalo, goat, or sheep and cock; and wild animals like tiger, antelope, and elephant; traces of cloth and wood. The engraving of animals on bronze and on ornament indicative of the primitive workmanship. Caldwell could stumble upon a copper bangle during his inspection at the site. The people were evidently skillful in molding pottery, in casting or brassing metals, in weaving, and in working stone and wood. The presence of husks of rice and millet indicates domestication of these grains. Iron weapons were used for both war and for animal sacrifice. The discovery of sacrifice implements prompted Caldwell to conclude that the people of Adi Kannur were not adherents of Vedic religion. Payampalli. Payampalli is a village in Trivandrum Taluk, Vellore district. The Archaeological Survey of India carried out an excavation in 1960 and unearthed black and red ware pottery in this megalithic site. A large number of unburnias were also found in this region. The date of this culture based on radiocarbon dating in 1000 BC. Kodumanal. Kodumanal, 40 km from Erode, is located on the northern bank of Novel River, a tributary of the Kaveri. A series of excavations were carried out during the 1980s and 1990. The most recent was in 2012. Inhabitation trenches and megalithic burials of Kodumanal. The good unreached includes pots, weapons, tools, ornaments, and beads, particularly carnial, akin to those found at Mohenjo-daro. Since carnial was not known to this region in ancient time, it may have been brought to Kodumanal from outside. In the Sangamberg, Pathriparthu, a place called Kodumanal, belonging to the Chera king, is praised for gemstones, and therefore some archaeologists argue that Kodumanal is the ancient name of the Kodumanal. Hoard of Roman coins have been discovered, and it is believed that this is a result of an export of gemstones to the Roman world, resulting in return a huge inflow of gold from the latter into the region. Conches and bangles remnants of furnace, a kiln floor filled with ash shoot, and potsherds with Tamil Brahmi inscriptions are other finds in the site. Pit burials, urn and chamber tombs of different types excavated off Kodumanar, and the name inscribable on potsherd may indicate habitation by multi-ethnic groups. The graphic lists of potsherd give a lot of information about the people and their activities. A manhire found at a burial site is assigned to the Megalithic period, according to Y. Sobhuyalu Kodumanal Iskovial, the Sangam anthologist, 2nd century BCE to 2nd century. The Aryans entered Vedic society. So far, we have considered the late Harappa cultures, Cartolotic and painted river cultures. Let us now turn to the evidence from the Vedic texts, which, unlike the archaeological evidence that tell us only about the material culture, throw light on the ethnic and cultural identities of people because of the references found in the Vedas. The Aryan question in one of the important issues concerning the early history of India, the Aryans. The attempt to write a history of India began when the Europeans colonized India. They compiled the archaeological and literary sources as well as oral traditions. Certain nations, for example, the Aryans, were developed and used in the colonial context when many parts of Asia and Africa were under the influence of the European powers. The concept of race were widely prevalent at that time to classify and categorize people. Some of the views reflect the racist ideas of the colonial times. The Aryan theory was linked to the blue-eyed white race and its connection with Europeans. Nazis used the Aryans concept for their political agenda, ultimately leading to the Holocaust. The recent studies have established that the word Aryan does not denote race, but only refers to the original speakers of Indo-Aryan languages. Philosophers study language in oral and written forms of languages based on the historical evidence. They use etymology, comparative linguistics, literary criticism, history, and linguistics in their study. Through the Rig Veda is in Sanskrit, about 300 words of the Munda and Dravidian languages have been identified in it, suggestions culture mixed with earlier inhabitations. From the Vedant, it is evident that Aryans used domesticated horses and chariots. Their chariots had spoked wheels and they used bows and arrows. They practiced agriculture and pastoralism. They buried and also cremated the dead. The cult of fire and the use of som drink were prevalent among the speakers of the Indo-Aryan languages. The home of Indo-Europeans and Indo-Aryans is still a matter of debate. Many many scholars are of the view that the Aryans came to India and migrants from Central Asia. It is also believed that several waves might have happened. There are several factors which support this hypothesis. The traits of the culture of Aryans cover Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which is geographically interlinked with India and West Asia and Europe. One of the accepted areas of the Aryan home is Eastern Europe, Central Asia, north of the Black Sea. The Bactria Margina archaeological complex is closely related to Aryan culture dated to 1900 BC to 1500 BC. Ceramics of South Central Asian archaeological sites resemble those found in the Swat Valley. References to the names of Indo-European languages are found in an inscriptions dated to 2200 BCE discovered in modern Iraq. Anatolian inscriptions of 900 to 1700 BC and Kassite inscriptions of the 1600 BC Iraq and Mitanni inscriptions of 1400 BC Syria. Bogasgui inscriptions referring to names similar to the Vedic gods 1400 BC have the common features of the Indo-European languages, but no such inscriptions are found in India. The term Ashv and several other terms in Rigveda have common roots in the various Indo-Aryan languages. In the Rigveda, the term Ashv horse equals to 115 times and Rishabh bull 170 times. Tiger and rhinoceros, which are tropical animals, are not mentioned in the Rigveda. There is no trace of the urban way of life in the Rigveda. Hence, the identity of Aryan is not correlated with the Harappa culture, where there is no evidence for horse. Nowadays, DNA studies are also used for understanding ancient migration. M17, a genetic marked DNA, is said to have been found among the speakers of Indo-European Rigvedic culture. Rigvedic Samhita is the earliest text that relates to the early Vedic period. The early Vedic culture is placed between 1500 BC and 1000 BC. The political, social, and economical aspects of life of this period are reflected in the Rigvedic human geography. In the Indian subcontinent, the early Aryans lived in the area of eastern Afghanistan, Pakistan, Punjab, and Ferengis of western Uttar Pradesh. Dashas and Dashyus. The Sragyoda, the Rigvedas speak about not only the Aryans but also about the non-Aryans. People whom the Aryans encountered in India. When the Rigvedic people moved into India, they come into conflict with people whom they referred to the Dasyus or Dasas. Evidently, the Aryans differentiated themselves from the dark native people who had different culture practice and sought to maintain their distinction. The Rigveda has reference to the several other books, Simu and Kikata are grouped with the Dasyus. Sambara, son of Kulitara, is mentioned as a chief with 19 forts of settlements. Chin was another chief with many troops. The Rig Veda mentioned the defeat of a chief called Sambara by Devodasa of the Bharat clan. Polity and political clashes. The concept of polity developed in the Rig Vedic times. Various units of habitation and divisions such as the Janas, Vish, Gana, Gram, and Kula are reflected to the Rig Veda. The Vedas speak about the Aryans and their enemies and the battle they fought with them. The battles were fought more for cattle and material wealth, and the war booty acquired was shared. They not only fought with the non-Aryans but also fought among themselves. They invoked the support of the gods in their battles. They strongly believed that prayer, sacrifices, and rituals could offer support in their mundane life. The god in called Purandara, which means destroyed of settlements, which were perhaps fenced or planned to worship. The term Jana means tribe. The Bharatas and Tristu were the ruling Aryan clans who were supported by Vashishta the priest. The region of India was named Bharatvarsha after the tribe of Bharatas. The Bharat clan was opposed by 10 chiefs and 5 out of them were Aryans. This battle was known as the Battle of Ten Kings. The battle took place on the banks of the river Porshani, identified with the river Ravi. In this battle, Shudash won and he became important, leading to the dominance of Bharat clan. The Purush were one of the defeated clans. The Purus and Bharatas formed an alliance and later they formed Kuru clan. Later, the Kurus allied with Panchals and established their control over the upper Ganga valley. Social division. The Vedic people distinguished themselves from the non-Aryan people where Varna was the term used by Aryans to refer to color and category. The Rig Veda refers to Arya Varna and Das Varna. The Dasas and Dasyas were conquered and treated as slaves. They came to be considered Sudras. In the later period, social classes were classified as warriors, priests, and common people. Shudras as a category of people appeared at the end of the Rig Vedic period. Slavery. Slavery was common and slaves were given as gifts to the priests, but there is no reference to wage labor. Horses, drawn chariots, and bronze objects were possessed by a few suggestions. Social distinctions. Vedic society were largely egalitarian initially, and social distinctions emerged later. According to the Purush Sukta of the Rig Veda, the various varnas emerged: the Brahmans from the mouth, the Kshatri from the arms, the Vaishya from the thighs, and the Shudras from the feet of Purush. When he was sacrificed, these social divisions are considered to have arisen towards the end of the early Vedic period, where various professional groups such as various priests, cattle keepers, farmers, barbers, and also mentioned panias were itinerary traders or perhaps cravens traders. Panias are also seen as enemies in some wares. Tribes and family. Kinship was the basis of the social structure of Rigvedic society. People were identified with specific clans, and the clans formed the tribe or Jana. The term Jana occurs in the Rig Veda 21 times, but the Janpada does not occur even once. The term which refers to the common people, occurs 170 times, and the lived in grams, villages. The family Grih was the main social unit within the tribe. It was headed by the Grihapati, and his wife was also as Sapatni, and the family at the point of time were perhaps a joint family. Women had a respectable position, but it is not possible to generalize about this. Society was essentially patriarchal with a preference for male children and cattle. The birth of a son was preferred perhaps because of the material nature of the society, which required male members for their clashes to establish dominance over the territories. Having 10 sons was considered as a blessing. Women attended assemblies and offered sacrifice. Marriage was common, but primitive practices were also continued. Polyandry seems to have existed, and widow remarriage was also known. People married at the age of 16 to 17, according to scholars, and there is little evidence of child marriage. Economy, agriculture. Archaeological evidence points to the development of agriculture among the Rigvedic people. The Plakshar is mentioned in the Rig Vedas. The field was known as Kshetra, and the term Rishi referred to plugging. The term Langla and Shura referred to plug, and the term Sita means the furrow created by plugging. Water for irrigation was probably down from wells by cattle-driven water lifts using pulleys. They had knowledge of different seasons, sowing, harvesting, and threshing. They cultivated barley, yavam, and wheat, goduma, pastoralism. Cattle rearing was an important economic activity for the Aryans. Although they practiced agriculture, cattle were considered wealth. The term for war in the Rig Veda was Gavishiti, which means search for cows, which is the contemporary term Goshti for factions as well. The donations to the priest were mainly cows and women slaves but not land, which reveals the importance of pastoralism. There was no private property in land. Craft production. The Rig Veda mentions artisans such as carpenters, chariot makers, weavers, and leather works. Copper metallurgy was one of the important developments of this period. The term ayas in the Rig Veda refers to copper and bronze. Karmara Smith in mentions in the Rig Veda. Likewise, there are references to the shiri and yarn, indicating spinning which was done by women, and to carpenters' taksham. Weaving of cloths of wool is also referred to, and obviously it was necessary in the cold weather. Some of the crafts were full-time craft involving specialists, trade exchange, and redistribution. Trade activities were limited, though traders were present during the early Vedic period. Pennies are referred to as traders, and they were perhaps craven traders. The word pan means bread, barter, which was a mode of exchange. Nishka was a gold or silver ornament used in barter. A priest received 100 horses and 100 niksha as fee of sacrifices. The danas and dakshinas offered to people were means of redistributing resources. The dakshina was both a fee for a specific service and also a mean of distributing wealth. The distribution of cows helped spread pastoral activities and economical production. Transport. Bullock carts, horses, and horses-drawn chariots were used for transport. There are a reference to the sea, Samudra, and boats. Now, boats driven by 100 oars are mentioned. Polity and administration. The polity of the Rigvedic period was that of the tribal society. The chief of the tribe was the main political head, and he was called Rajan. The kings lived in multi-pillared places. They offered gifts of cattle, chariots, and horse ornaments and gold to the priests. Rajan was a hereditary chief. He was perhaps elected by the assembly called Samiti. The main duty of the king was to protect the tribe. He protected wealth, fought wars, and offered prayers on behalf of God. The kings had authority over the territory and the people. Vedic society was military. Bowls, daggers, axes, and lances were the main weapons of war. Tributes and brutally collected from war were redistributed by the king. There are also references to gift of daughters and slaves. The king trust, Trasdayu, the chief of the Purush, gave away 50 women as a gift. The chief was known as Gopa or Gopati, which means chief of cattle. The assemblies called Sabha, Samiti, Vidhata, and Gana are mentioned in the Rigveda. Sabha was the assembly of the elders of the elite. Samiti was an assembly of people, and Vidhata was the assembly of tribe. They performed military and religious functions. Women attended the Sabhas and Vidhatas. The king showed the support of the Samiti and Sabha for his activities. There are debates about the exact nature of these assemblies and functions. Most of our understanding of the condition of Vedic society depends upon the interpretations of various terms. Sometimes it is hard to reconstruct the original meaning. The Purohita or priest offered advice to the king. Vedic priests advised the kings, inspired them, and praised their deeds. In turn, they received rewards for their services. Senani was the chief of the army. There is no evidence of tax collecting officers. Perhaps people made voluntary contributions called bali to the king. Some scholars say that bali was imposed tax and not voluntary. There is no reference to the administration of justice. The officer who controlled the territory was called Vrajapati. He had the Kulpas of head of fighting groups called Gramini. Gramini was the head of the village and fighting unit. Vedic religion rituals. Religions and rituals played an important role in Vedic society. In the Rig Veda, the natural forces, sun, moon, rivers, mountains, and rains were refined as divinities. The religion was naturalistic and polytheistic. Indra was the most important god, and he was called Purandra. Agni was seen as intermediary between god and people. Surya was the god who removed darkness. Ushas was the goddess of dawn. Aditi, Prithvi, and Sinivali are the other goddess. Varna, the god of water, was next in importance. This god was an upholder of natural order. Soma was the god of plants, and the drink was named after him. Soma drink was part of the ritual, and the preparation of this intoxicating drink is explained in many hymns. Maruti was the god of strength. Interesting, there are a few references to Rudra or Shiva. Rituals were adopted as a solution to many issues and the problems of day-to-day life, and thus the priest had an important role in the society characteristics of the society. In the early Vedic periods, lineage and tribes constituted society, and the king had limited power. The various tribal groups of Aryans and non-Aryans fought to control the territories. Social divisions did not take deep root, although the concept of one and Aryan's identities existed in pastoralism and predominant, and the cattle-centered clashes were common, although agriculture did play an important role. The archaeological sites suggest different types of craft of production, including metal, carpentry, pottery, and clothes. Later Vedic culture. The later Vedic culture is dated to the period between 1000 BCE and 700 to 600 BCE. The painted grave were culture of the Iron Age, which has been identified the archaeologists at many excavated sites, is associated with the later Vedic culture. This period witnessed political, social, economical complexity and development. The later Vedic texts. The later Vedic texts were composed after the Rig Veda Samhitas. The Yajur, Sama, and other Vedas were composed after the Rig Veda. Eastward expansion of the Aryans. The Aryan speakers expanded from the Punjab to western Uttar Pradesh in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. In the later Vedic period, the history of ancient India was thus marked by the movement of cultures and instructions and battles among various groups for territories and resources. It has been suggested that while the Aryans migrated to the region of eastern part of the Ganga Valley, the Indo-Iranians migrated from the region of Iran to the region of Punjab. The latter Vedic texts speak about the region of Kuru Panchal, which falls in the Indo-Gangetic divide and the upper Ganga valley. The area mentioned at the southeastern boundary of the Aryans in Rigveda is listed as Atre Brahman as the midland, which indicated the movement of the Aryans into the Ganga valley in the later Vedic periods. Perhaps this expansion was induced by the need for water and land resources, fresh, less occupied territories, and population pressures. The Kurus, Panchals, Vaishyas, and Ushinars as the tribes of this period. References to the Saraswati and Drishtavati rivers occur in the later Vedic text also. Around 1000 BCE, the Vedic Aryans moved towards Koshala region in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Vidya in north Bihar, where the Vedic people encountered the local people following Chalcolithic material culture in the upper Ganga valley. The Vedas acquired Munda words indicating the Munda speaking people lived in the Ganga valley. The region of Koshala and Vidya were the easternmost territories of the Aryan expansion during this period. By the end of the Vedic period, Panchala and Vidya were Aryanized. The area beyond this region in the east was seen as an alien territory. In the Atharva Veda, the people of Ang and Magad Bihar were seen as enemies. Similarly, the Pundras of Bengal and the Andhras were seen as outside the Aryan identity in the Atre Brahman. This suggested that these regions were not influenced by Aryan culture. What the gather is that the process of Aryanization gradually spread from the northwest to the southeast, mainly into the Ganga Valley. Later Vedic culture and iron. Iron was an important metal used for implements in this period. It was called as Saima Ayas of Kshatri Ayas of the dark metal. Iron is believed to have played an important role in the conversion of the forest of the Ganga Valley into the agricultural lands. By the end of Vedic period, the knowledge of iron had reached eastern Uttar Pradesh and Vidya. Earlier, it was believed that iron oriented around 700 BC, but recent research dates banning of iron to around 1200 BCE or even earlier. The earlier views gave excessive emphasis of iron to the colonization of the Ganga Valley, but new scholarship argues that iron was not the only factor behind the expansion of the population, settlement, and territories. With the intense intensification of agriculture. The later Vedic people led a settled life, leading to formation of territories. Unit the term Janpada, referring to territory, is found in the Brahmins dated to ca. 800 BCE. There are more than 1,000 sites of painted grey were cultured in this area, suggestions that new settlements came up and the upper Ganga valley was densely populated. People lived either in wood bricks houses houses with battle and dwarf walls. The foundations for the towns must have emerged during the later Vedic period. This was a period of intense interactions. The term Nagara, referring to commercial quarters, is found in the later Vedic text. However, large towns appear only at the end of the Vedic period. The sites of the Hastinapur and Kaushambi are considered proto-urban, urban-like settlements. The material culture of this period shows more diversity and is an improvement over the early Vedic period. It can be surmised that there was surplus production to support various classes such as chiefs, princes, and priests. Political organization in the early Vedic age, tribal politics were dominant. The king was elected by assemblies. In the later Vedic period, the assemblies became less important and the power of the king increased. The influence of assembly called with the disappeared while Samiti and Sabha continued in this period. The development of large kingdom reduced the power of the assemblies. The Rajan was the leader who led the army in the battle. The concepts of the Samrat and Samraj developed and they suggest the increase in the power and ambition of the king. The legitimation of the kingship became important with the performance of various sacrifices such as the Vajpayee and Rasuya. The king developed more control over the territory, people, and resources. Purohita, which means one who places the king in the forefront, became important in the established of the polity and kingship. Monarchy developed. The Rajan became the controller of the social order. Through the sacrifices to achieve some benefits were carried out of the or to control the resources. The kings presented cows, horses, chariots, gold, cloths, and female slaves to the priest. The Three Brahman says that king has to provide 100 pieces of gold and cattle to Brahmana who anoints him. Thus, the priest became important in the formation of polity and royalty. The terms such as Rashtra to denote a territory and Raj means so when power appeared, the king received voluntary or compulsory contribution called bali from the people. Such voluntary contribution become tribute to the Mahabharata offers clauses to historical development and is suggestive of the power struggle to control the territories. The Ramayana too is suggestive of the Aryan expansion and the encounters with native people in the forest. The territories formation and the development of linguages become stronger during the later Vedic period. Romila Thapar characterized the development in the first millennium BCE as the movement from lineage to state. The development of the state level political organization emerged only after 500 BCE and the later Vedic society was therefore in transition. Several lineages become more territories and settled in the later Vedic age. This is evidenced by the term Janpada as we saw earlier. The mid-first millennium BCE had political organizations such as the Raj and Gansabhas, oligarchies, and these institutions developed in the later Vedic period. Lineage is a group of people descends from a common ancestor. As we saw earlier, the clans of Bhartas and Purush combined to form the Kurus, and along with the Panchals, they occupied the central part of the Ganga Jamuna Dua Panchal territory was the northwestern Uttar Pradesh. The Kuru Panchals became one major ethnic group, and Hastinapur became their capital. The war between the Kauravas and Pandavas was the theme of the Mahabharata, and the both of them belonged to the clan of Kauravas. Traditions say that the Hastinapur was flooded and the Kuru clan moved to Kaushambi near Allahabad. Sacrifices and rituals gained importance in the later Vedic society. The king became more independent. Rituals dominated kingship and increased by the power and influence of the Raja, Rajanyas and the Brahmans, while distancing the king from the wish. The Ashwamedh Yagya involved letting a horse loose into areas where it moved freely. This was an acceleration. The authority of the king was recognized and a battle issues when the horse was challenged. The Vajipe ritual involved a chariot race. Such innovation modes of rituals helped to increase the power of the king. The formation of social distinction became prominent. Social organization, the social transformation in the later Vedic period is much more clearly reflected in the references in the Vedic text. The social division of one became more established. The teaching was seen as the occupation of the Brahmans. The vices of Brahmans and, cow, and cows were given important status. Rajana refers to Kshatri, and they were the warriors and the rulers who received Bali as tax. Striking changes took place in the Varna system. There was an increase in the prevalence of the two higher classes, the Brahmins and the Kshatri, at the cost of Vaishyas and Shudras. In the Panchvimsa Brahmana, the Kshatri is placed first, higher than the Brahmana, but in the Satpat Brahman, the Brahman is placed higher than Kshatri. In later Vedic society, the importance of the Purohita priest is stressed and mentioned in the Vedic text. The Kshatri challenge Brahmanica supremacy and their exclusive privileges of entering the ashram are regulating four-stage life, namely Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanprastha and Sannyas. The outcome of this was the birth of Jainism, Buddhism and Ajivakam. The system of four varnas had taken deep root and become rigid in the course of time. The popularity of rituals helped the Brahmins to attain power. Brahmins became important and the king supported them. Although they had conflict with Rajanyas, the various nobles, the concept of Dvij, twice one, developed and the Upanayana sacred thread was limited to the upper section of the society. This ceremony marked in the initiations for education. The fourth one was denied this privilege, and the Gayatri month could not be restricted by the Shudras. Women were also denied Upanayan and Gayatri month. The king asserted his authority over the three ones. The Atri Brahman refers to the Brahman as the seekers of support, and he could be removed by king from his position. Certain craft group managed to attain higher stages. For example, the Rathkars, the chariot maker, had the right to wear the sacred thread. Vaishya referred to the common people. They were involved in agriculture, cattle breeding, and artisans. Later, they became traders. Vaishya paid tax to the king. Some social groups were placed in ranking even below the Shudras. However, cross-mana marriage did happen. The idea of Gotra emerged in the later Vedic period. Gotra literally meant cowpen, and it referred to a group of people from a common ancestor persons of the same Gotra were considered as brother and sister and could not therefore intermarry. Several unilinear descent groups existing with common ancestors, several related clans from the type family. The household became more structured, which means it becomes more organized. The family was an important social unit. The family was patriarchal with patrilineal descent. The relations with the family were hierarchical. Polygamy, taking many wives, was prevalent. Several household rituals were also developed for the welfare of the family. The married man with his wife was the yajman. The concept of ashram, referring to various stages of life, was not well established in this time. While brahmacharya, grihastha, and vanprastha are mentioned, sannyas had not developed. Women. The status of women declined as the society became more structured and the patriarchal family became more important. In the family, the father was the head. The region of primogeniture was strong, though women had participated in rituals in the Rig Vedic period. They were excluded in the later Vedic period. Daughters are spoken of as a source of trouble. Their work was to look after the cattle, milking animals, and fetching water. Economy. The economic activities of this period were quite diversified. Agriculture, pastoralism, craft producing, and trade contributed to the economic development. Agriculture activities and increased during the late Vedic period. The Satpat Brahman mentioned rituals related to plugging undertaken by the kings. That suggest the importance given to cultivation by the rulers and the shift to agriculture to support the increasing population. The God Balrama is displayed with a plug which suggests the importance of cultivation. The Vedic people cultivated barley and rice and wheat. Wheat was the staple food of Punjab region, the Vedic people began to use rice in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. The use of rice rather than wheat is noticed in the Vedic rituals. Pastoralism contributed to be important. Cattle were considered sacred. Scared, they became part of exchange and redistribution. The offering of cattle was part of Dakshina. Continued pastoralism supplemented agriculture, craft production, arts and craft proliferated during the later Vedic age, and craft specialization took deep roots when compared to early Vedic period, since more occupational groups are mentioned in the period. Evidence of iron work is noticed from about 1200 BCE. Metals such as copper, tin, gold, bronze, and lead are mentioned. These metals were smelted and worked by specialization group. The copper objects were used for making weapons for war and hunting. Weaving was undertaken by women. Leatherwork, pottery, and carpentry were well known. Terms such as Kolala referring to potters and Odna Sutra referring to wool appear. Bow makers, rope makers, arrow makers, hide dressers, stone breakers, physicians, goldsmiths, and astrologers are some of the specialist professional groups mentioned in the text. Professions such as physicians, washermen, hunters, sportsmen, astrologers, and cook are mentioned. References to the elephants are often found in the Atharvaveda along with the elephant keeper. Elephant keeper. The increase in references to such groups indicated a society in transformation. The performance of Vedic sacrifices were also a type of service providers. The priests played an important role in legitimizing the role of king through various rituals. Wealth was measured in terms of cattle and animals. There is a mention of offering or 20 camels, 100 gold necklace, 300 horses, and 10,000 cows in Dakshina. Trade and exchange. Trade and exchange had development in the later Vedic age. The material culture found in the archaeological sites reveals the movement of commodities and material. Specialized trans traders existed. No evidence of coins has been found, and therefore barter must have been the medium of exchange. The introduction of coins took place after about 600 BC. Religious faith and belief system. During the later Vedic period, the Upper Ganga Doab was the center of the Aryan culture. This region is described as the land of Kuru Panchals. The Vedic called Agni and Indra lost their importance. Prajapati became the main deity. Rudra, the god of rituals identified with Shiva, became important. The Sapat Brahman listed the names of Rudra as Pashupatinath, Sarv, Bhav, and Vahikas. Vishnu was conceived as the protector of people. There is no references to Vishnu's incarnations. Each one has its own deities. Rituals became important in society. It was believed that rituals and sacrifices could solve many problems. The rituals became more complex, required more resources, and took longer time. This indirectly reflects the demand for rituals and the formation of elite groups who could spend more resources on rituals and sacrifice. The correct performance of rituals was stresses was laid on the playing Dakshina. Numerous rituals were preferable for solving all kinds of day-to-day problems. The resort to rituals and sacrifices as a solution for problems led to the view that material wealth could achieve anything. The ideas of the Upanishads argue against such a view and stress the importance of realizing the Atman or inner self. Such degeneration of rituals and the material oriented nature of the prayers created dissensions and led to the development of the heterodox faiths such as the Buddhism and Jainism, which emphasizes correct human behavior and discipline. Philosophy and education. The disciplines of philosophy, literature, and science developed in this period. Various branches of learning, such as the literature, grammar, mathematics, ethics, and artomony, developed. Education was limited to males. Teacher, people relationship was cultivated through person-oriented training. The development of Vedic texts and the importance given to pronunciations, grammar, and oral transmission suggested training in authorization and memorization as a part of the Vedic system of education. The development of various types of texts could be considered as developing solution for certain mundane issues. Had a quest of knowledge. Aryanaks are concerned with the priests who were in the forest. Upanishad, which means to sit nearby. Texts with philosophical inquiries were composed during this period. They were also referred to as Vedanta since they were attached as the last part of the Vedic text. सत्यमेव जयते इज फ्रॉम मुंडक उपनिषद. सत्यमेव जयते का जो उपनिषद लिया गया है वो मुंडक का उपनिषद से लिया गया है. They lost stress of knowledge and the realizations of the self or Atman and Brahman, the supreme being meditation cycle of the birth and death. They convey the ideas of karma and good conduct, self-restraint, mercy, and generosity or vices. Despite the ritual dominatory aspects of Vedic life, some seeds were pursuit of knowledge and virtuous conduct. Dara Shikoh, the Mughal prince, translated the Upanishads into Persian in 1657, much before the colonial schools developed an interest in ancient Indian literature. Other aspects of life. The late Vedic culture had evidence of the music and fine arts. Music instruments such as lute and drum are referred to in the text. With the development or cultivation and pastoralism, different types of food and drinks made of grains, milk and ghee and paint were consumed. Evidence of the use of silk and ornaments of metal, gold and copper is found. Metal mirrors were also used. The archaeological sites have uncovered beads and ornaments, and the fabrication of glass beads was also developed in the latter part of the Vedic. Characterization of the later Vedic society. Later Vedic society period is marked by the language of clans and a small kingdom developed in many parts of the Ganga Valley, leading to the development of the state after 600 BC. The idea of Janpada and the Rashtra as territory units have developed. The Raj wielded much power and the social divisions began to strike deep roots. The Varna system had developed well, and Shudra identity became more marked during this period. समरी है हमारे पास पूरे चैप्टर की. आफ्टर द डिक्लाइन ऑफ द इंडस कल्टिवेशन मॉडर्न कल्चर डेवलप्ड across North India. Copper, followed by iron, came to the widely used. Iron helped to expand areas of cultivation, leading to agrarian surplus. As this facilitated feeding of more numbers of people, there were greater instance of the migration and population growth. The late Harappa culture suggests that some of the groups moved into eastern direction after the decline of the Indus cultivation. Second, the Chalcolithic culture, including the OCP cultures, flourished in different parts of India. People belonging to these cultures began to engage in pastoral and wellness agricultural activities. The Aryans migrated to India around 1500 BC. The Vedic texts from an important sources of this period, horses and iron, are associated with the Aryans. The Rig Veda, the earliest text in Sanskrit, portrays the society and the culture of the early Vedic period. The early Vedic culture was characterized by the pastoral as well as agriculture practices. People worshipped nature in the form of deities such as the Agni, Varun, and Surya. The later Vedic period, for which Yajur, Sam, and Atharvedas are the sources of involved into a complex and rigid society. The four divisions of the society, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, become well established in this period. Social groups of later Vedic societies were organized into the दो. मैं आपको क्वेश्चन आंसर के पास ले जाके छोड़ दे रही हूँ. तो फिर मैं इस चैप्टर को थोड़ा सा हिंदी में भी आपको एक्सप्लेन कर देती हूँ, जिससे कि आपको कोई भी चीज़ नहीं हो जाए. बताते जो ऋग्वेद है, इसमें कुल हमारे पास 10 मंडल लिखे थे. 1028 में सूक्त है जो कि साकल में. ठीक है. मंडल 2 से जो 7 है वो सबसे प्राचीन माने जाते थे. जो 1 से 10 है वो हमारा नवीन है. प्रथम है, दूसरा है. सारे चरणों में अलग अलग चीज़ें. जो सातवां है हमारा, जो ऋग्वेद का जो 7वां चैप्टर है ना, 7वां मंडल है, उसमें ना हमारे दशरथ युद्ध का वर्णन किया गया है. और इसके जो रचयिता थे वो महर्षि वशिष्ठ थे. ठीक है. जो 10वां है उसमें क्षत्र, वैश्य और शूद्र को बांटा गया था. ठीक है. इसके जो रचयिता इंद्राणी, सचिव एंड शाक्य हैं. ठीक है. इसमें ब्राह्मण ग्रंथ को जो है ऐत्रेय या कौशिकी ब्राह्मण कहा जाता था. ठीक है. ऐत्रेय ब्राह्मण हमने बीच में पढ़ा ना, ऐत्रेय ब्राह्मण हर जगह आ रहा था. यजुर्वेद जो था हमारा वो श्रोत और कर्मकांड पर आधारित था, जिसमें 2 तरीके के हमारे भागों में बांटा गया था, शुक्ल यजुर्वेद और कृष्ण यजुर्वेद. शुक्ल यजुर्वेद जो है इसमें वो गद्य में होता था यजुर्वेद, और जो हमारा कृष्ण यजुर्वेद है उसको पद्य में दिया गया था. ठीक है. पुरोहित को अथर्व कहते थे. इसके अंतिम भाग को ईशोपनिषद कहा गया था. अथर्ववेद क्या है हमारे पास, इसमें पुरोहित को ब्रह्मा कहा जाता था. जहाँ भी बात होती है स्पिरिट की बार बार, उसको कहते हैं. इसमें हमारे विश्वास, विचार, अंधविश्वास का काफ़ी वर्णन था. उपनिषद का ये एक दर्शन पदार्थ, और इसे वेदांत भी कहा जाता है. वेदांत का अधिकार, जैसे मैं बोला था ना, उपनिषद का क्या मीन होता है. इसका मीन है गुरु के समीप बैठकर ज्ञान को प्राप्त करना. इसमें पहली बार जो चर्चा की गई थी ना, मोक्ष की है. और इसका जो वर्णन है श्वेतांबर उपनिषद में है. वेदांग भी इसमें पढ़े होंगे हम लोग. वेदांग करते वेदों का अंग है. ठीक है. जो सामवेद है उसमें संगीत हमारा निकल के आया है बाहर को. ठीक है. ऋग्वैदिक काल में इसमें सबसे प्राचीन वेद है हमारा ऋग्वेद है, और इसमें लोहे का उल्लेख किया है जिसमें आयरन है. और अफगानिस्तान की 4 नदियाँ क्रोमो, कुभा, गोमती, सुवास्तु है ना. जैसे पुरानी प्राचीन नाम की बात करें तो जिसमें विवासा है, विपासी का जो आधुनिक वो व्यास है. परशुड़ी है अपना श्रावी, वितास्ता है झेलम, शतुद्री है, हमारा सतलज है, अस्किनी है, चिनाब, क्रोम है, कुम। इस तरीके के पूरे चैप्टर। ऋग्वैदिक काल में जो देवता है ना वो इंद्र, वरुण, मित्र तथा नासिक का उल्लेख बोगस को अभिलेख से हमारा मिलता है। आर्यों की जो सबसे पवित्र नदी के रूप में सरस्वती नदी को हम लोग मानते हैं, जिसे माते तमा, देवी तमा, नदी तमा जैसे नामों से भी जाना जाता है। ठीक है, थैंक यू सो मच। आई होप आप लोगों ने अपनी तैयारी अच्छे से कर ली होगी। जिनको भी हमारी बातें समझ में आ रही हैं, जिनको भी ये चैप्टर समझ में आता है, वो हमारी क्लास में जिन्होंने एडमिशन नहीं लिया है, लेना चाहते हैं, तो वो मुझे मैसेज कर सकते हैं टेलीग्राम पे। आई होप, विशिंग यू ऑल द बेस्ट। थैंक यू।